What would you do for a total stranger? Not a friend, not a family member, not someone who ever did anything for you, a complete stranger, someone you never met before, someone lying on the ground in the rain, someone with nothing in their stomach and nobody around to help them. Would you stop? Most people walk past. Most people look at their phone. Most people say to themselves, somebody else will help. That is not my problem. I have my own problems. And trust me, most people have problems. But there is one girl in this story who stopped. And the reason her stopping is so incredible, the reason this story is going to stay with you long after you finish watching, is because of what she had left when she stopped. She had one thing. One single ring on her finger, the last piece of jewelry she owned. Every other ring, every bracelet, every necklace she had ever received in her entire life, gone. Sold. One by one, month by month. Each one traded away to pay rent, to buy food, to keep the lights on, to survive one more week in a world that had taken both her parents when she was just 6 years old and left her to figure everything out completely alone. That last ring was not just jewelry. That ring was her safety net. It was the one thing standing between her and absolutely nothing. And she sold it. For a stranger lying on a wet road in the rain who she had never seen before and would probably never see again. Now here is the part of this story that is going to knock you over. That stranger, he was not just any stranger. He was the son of one of the most powerful billionaires in the city. He owned his own luxury car showroom at 19 years old. He had more money in his account than most people earn in 10 lifetimes. And he was lying on the ground in the rain, unconscious, in front of a girl who had nothing. And that girl sold her last ring to buy him food. She did not know who he was. He did not know who she was. Neither of them knew that what happened on that rainy afternoon was not just a moment of kindness. It was the beginning of everything. This is the story of Zara and Emre. It is a story about two people who could not be more different, one born into wealth, one raised in poverty, one who never had to worry about tomorrow, one who never knew if tomorrow was coming. And it is about how one rainy afternoon, one empty stomach, and one last ring connected them in a way that neither of them planned and neither of them could stop. But before we get to the rain, before we get to the ring, before we get to the moment their eyes met on a wet across street, we need to go back. We need to go back to the father. Because you cannot understand the son without understanding the father. You cannot understand why this billionaire raised his boy the way he did, why he made the deal he made, why he gave his son millions but also demanded everything back. You cannot understand any of that without knowing where the father came from. And where the father came from will change how you see everything else in this story. We also need to understand Zara. Not the Zara who shows up at the end of this story with a mansion and a marriage and 2 beautiful children. We need to understand the Zara who grew up with nothing. The Zara who lost her parents at 6 years old and kept going anyway. The Zara who sold jewelry piece by piece, ring by ring, month by month, and still smiled at strangers on the street because that was who she was, even when she had nothing left to give. Because that is the most important part of this entire story. The ring she sold was not just gold. It was character. It was proof of who she was at her absolute lowest point. And the man she fed with that ring. He saw it, he saw every bit of it, and he never forgot. This story is long. It is full. It has everything: love, sacrifice, childhood, ambition, rain, a ring, a car showroom, a proposal nobody saw coming, a wedding, 5 years of grinding, 2 children, and a world that got bigger for 2 people who started in completely different places. So if you are ready, and I promise you, you are going to want to be ready for this one. Stay right here. And before we begin, if you believe that kindness always finds its way back to you, that what you give in your lowest moment becomes your greatest story, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it means everything to us. Subscribe to Fair Folktales and ring that notification bell. We tell the stories that stay with you, the stories that make you look at your own life and ask, what am I capable of? And comment below. We want to know, have you ever helped a stranger when you had almost nothing yourself? Tell us. We read every single comment. Now, let us go back to the beginning. The city of Accra had many rich men. But not all rich men were the same. Some were born into money. They received it the way you receive a birthday gift, without working for it, without suffering for it, without understanding what it cost. They spent it without thinking because thinking about money was not something they had ever needed to do. And then there was Kwame Asante. Kwame Asante was 52 years old, and he had not been born into anything. He had been born in a 2-room house in a neighborhood of Accra where the roads flooded every rainy season, and the power went out twice a week, and the smell from the open gutter outside the house was something you never fully got used to. You just stopped noticing it after a while. His father was a daily laborer who carried things, boxes, bags, whatever needed carrying, at the central market. His mother sold kenke and fried fish from a large aluminum pot that she set up on the street corner every morning at 5 o'clock and stayed until everything was sold or the evening came, whichever was first. They were not cruel people. They were not broken people. But they were tired people, and being tired and poor at the same time is one of the heaviest combinations a human being can carry. Kwame was the third of 5 children, and from the very beginning he was different. Not in the way that books describe talented children, not with magical gifts or obvious genius. He was different in the way that only becomes visible over years. He paid attention. He watched. He remembered. He connected things. He watched his father carry other people's goods and thought about who owned the goods and what they got at the end of the day compared to what his father got. He watched his mother sell food and thought about the chain, who grew the corn, who transported it, who processed it, who sold it, who ate it, and where in that chain the real money sat. He was 9 years old, and he was already mapping the world. School was hard, not because he was not smart. Because the school was bad, the textbooks were old, and the teachers were underpaid and tired. But Kwame sat in the front row every single day and wrote down everything the teacher said, even when the teacher was wrong, because writing it down was a habit he had decided on, and habits, once decided, were not negotiable. He finished junior secondary school at 15. His parents could not afford senior secondary. He did not complain. He went to work. He started by helping at his uncle's small carpentry shop. Then he moved to a construction company as a general laborer at 16. Then at 17 he started noticing something. Every construction project he worked on needed supplies: cement, steel rods, timber, paint, sand, gravel. And every time the site foreman needed those supplies, he had to make multiple trips to multiple suppliers, spending hours on the road, paying inflated prices because he needed things urgently and had no standing arrangement. Kwame wrote this down in a notebook he kept in his shirt pocket. He thought about it for 3 months. Then he spent 6 months learning everything he could about construction materials, visiting suppliers, asking questions, comparing prices, understanding the logistics. He borrowed a small amount of money from his mother's kenke savings, money she did not tell his father about because his father would worry, and he used it to register a small trading business. His concept was simple. He would be the one phone call a construction foreman needed to make. One call, one supplier, everything delivered on time at a fair price. He would carry the relationship with every material supplier so that the foreman did not have to. He was 18 years old. The first year was nearly impossible. He had no truck, so he rented one by the day. He had no storage, so he used the corner of his uncle's yard. He had no credit with suppliers, so he paid cash, which meant small orders, which meant small margins. He worked 20 hours a day. He slept on a mat in the carpentry shop because he could not afford the time or money it cost to go home and come back. But slowly, the way all real things grow, slowly and then all at once, it worked. By year 3, Quame had a small office, 2 trucks of his own, and relationships with 14 suppliers across Accra. By year 5, he had 10 trucks and was supplying to some of the largest construction companies in the city. By year 7, he had a warehouse, a logistics team, and enough contracts that he was not chasing business anymore, business was chasing him. And somewhere in year 7, he met Adwoa. Adwoa was 25, a bookkeeper at one of the construction companies he supplied to. She had the specific quality that Quame had been looking for without knowing he was looking for it. She was completely honest. Not nice honest. There is a difference. Nice people tell you what you want to hear. Honest people tell you what you need to know. When Quame's invoices were slightly wrong, Adwoa called him directly and told him specifically what the error was and how much it cost him. No softening, just the numbers. He called her back to thank her. She said, "You do not need to thank me. The invoice was wrong." He said, "Most people would not have told me." She said, "Most people are not me." He asked her to dinner. She said yes. They were married 14 months later, in a ceremony that Quame paid for entirely himself, in a venue that his mother could not stop crying in, because she had never been inside a place like it before. By the time Quame was 40, he was a billionaire. Not almost a billionaire, not a paper billionaire, a real billionaire with a diversified portfolio that had grown from construction materials into real estate, manufacturing, and transport logistics across 4 West African countries. He had been featured in 3 business magazines. The president of Ghana had mentioned him in a speech about private sector development. His name was on a building at a university. But none of this was what he was most proud of. The thing Quame Asante was most proud of was sitting on the back seat of a school bus in 2006, 8 years old, wearing a clean uniform that Adwoa had ironed 3 times because she wanted every fold perfect, heading to the best school in Accra on the first day of term. His son, Emre Asante. Emre grew up knowing he was loved. Not spoiled, loved. There is a difference, and Quame understood the difference with the precision of a man who had grown up with love but not with money and knew exactly what each one did and did not provide. Emre went to a good school. He wore good clothes. He had a bedroom that was his alone, something Quame had not had until he was 23 years old. He had books and a computer and tutors when he needed them, and the kind of background support that allows a child to focus on being a child rather than on surviving. But Quame and Adwoa were careful. They talked to Emre about money the way most parents do not in lectures, in stories. Quame told his son about the mat on the floor of the carpentry shop, about the single truck rented by the day, about the notebook in the shirt pocket. He told these stories not to make his son feel guilty, but to give him the information he needed. That wealth was not permanent, that it had to be built and maintained and understood, and that the building was where the real satisfaction lived. And so Emre grew up not taking things for granted. He noticed what things cost. He asked how things worked. He watched his father's business with the same attention his father had once watched the market, mapping it, understanding it, filing it away. But the thing that lit Emre up, the thing that made his eyes go wide from the time he was about 6 years old, and nothing about this ever changed, was cars. Not just cars, luxury cars. It started when a family friend came to visit in a midnight blue Bentley Continental. Emre was 6. He walked around that car for 30 minutes. He asked the owner questions that the owner laughed at because they were too specific for a 6-year-old. What engine, how many horsepower, what the interior was made of, how fast. The owner answered, amused. Emre remembered every answer. After that, every car magazine he could find, every YouTube video, every auto show he begged his father to take him to. The names, the models, the years, the histories, the price points, All of it lived in Emre's head the way other children stored cartoon characters. Kwame watched this and said nothing negative about it. He had promised himself long ago that he would not be the parent who crushed a child's passion because it seemed impractical. Practical was what had been necessary for him. His son had the luxury of genuine passion, and Kwame respected that the way he respected everything he had not been able to have. When Emre was 16, he told his father the plan. They were sitting in Kwame's home office after dinner, Kwame at his desk reviewing contracts. Emre in the armchair. He always sat in when he came to his father with something important. He waited until his father had finished the page he was reading. "Papa," Emre said, "I know what I want to do." Kwame put his pen down. He had been waiting for this conversation. "Talk to me," he said. Emre talked. He had prepared. He had not just thought about this as a dream, he had thought about it as a business. He knew the Accra luxury car market. He had studied who was buying, what they were buying, what was missing. He had identified a gap. There was no dedicated premium luxury car showroom in Accra that offered the full range of ultra-high-end vehicles in one space with the service quality to match. The wealthy buyers of Accra were importing privately, paying premium prices, dealing with uncertainty on delivery. A showroom properly stocked, properly positioned, with Kwame's network behind it would dominate. Emre spoke for 40 minutes. When he finished, Kwame was quiet for a long moment. "How much?" he said. Emre had the number ready. He said it. Kwame nodded slowly. "I will fund it." Emre's face opened. But Kwame said, "There is a condition." "What condition?" "You pay me back every Sadie. Monthly once the business is operational. I am not giving you this money. I am lending it to you as a business partner." Emre blinked. "Papa, you have billions." "This is not about the money," Kwame said quietly. "This is about what you will feel when you sign that last repayment. You will feel something that money cannot give you. You will feel like you built something, not like someone built it for you." Emre looked at his father for a long time. Then he said, "Deal." They shook hands across the desk, father and son, billionaire and future millionaire. 2 years later, 2 months after Emre's 18th birthday, Asant Prestige Motors opened its doors in the most visible location in East Airport, Accra. The showroom floor held a Bentley Flying Spur, 2 Ferrari models, an Aston Martin Vantage, a Bugatti Chiron on special display, 3 high-spec BMWs, and a Rolls-Royce Ghost. The interior was designed by an architect who had worked on premium showrooms in Dubai. The staff were trained. The lighting was perfect. The air smelled like leather and new metal and ambition. Kwame's network did the rest. Within the first week, 3 of his business contacts had visited. Within the first month, 4 vehicles had been sold at margins that made Emre's accountant, a quiet 40-year-old man named Mr. Oppong, who had worked for Kwame for years, look up from his spreadsheet with raised eyebrows. By month 6, Emre Asant was a multi-millionaire. By month 8, he had paid his father back in full. Kwame received the final payment transfer on a Tuesday morning and called his son immediately. "It cleared," he said. "I know," Emre said. A pause. "How does it feel?" Kwame asked. Emre was quiet for a moment. He was standing in the middle of his showroom floor, looking at the cars around him, and he understood completely what his father had meant 2 years ago when he said there would be a feeling that money alone could not give. "It feels like mine," Emre said. Kwame said nothing for a moment. Emre could hear his father's breathing. "Good," Kwame said. "That is exactly how it is supposed to feel." Emre was 19 years old. He had a showroom. He had millions in his account. He had his father's respect and his mother's pride and a reputation in Accra that was growing faster than he had planned. He had everything. Or so he thought. He had no idea that in 3 weeks, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, He was going to be lying on the ground with nothing in his stomach, and the person who stopped to help him was going to change every plan he had ever made. Before we get to the rain, we need to know about Zara. Because Zara's story does not start on a rainy Thursday in Accra. It starts in a small town called Nsawam, 42 kilometers north of Accra, on a Tuesday morning in October, when Zara was 6 years old, and she came home from school to find the house quiet in a way that was wrong. Her mother's wrapper was still on the line outside. The pot was on the stove, but the fire had gone out. The front door was open, but nobody was home. Zara stood in the doorway and felt something she did not have a name for yet, a cold, specific wrongness that sat in her chest like a stone. Her parents had been in a car accident on the Nsawam road. They were both gone by the time the ambulance arrived. Zara was 6 years old. She went to her mother's sister. Her Auntie Grace lived in a 2-room apartment in Nsawam with 3 children of her own and a husband who drove a delivery truck and was away more than he was home. Auntie Grace was not a bad person. She was a tired person. She took Zara in because she had to, because family did not leave a 6-year-old on the street, but taking her in and raising her were 2 different things, and the difference showed. Zara slept on a mat in the corner. She ate after the other children. She helped with the cooking and the cleaning and the water fetching because it was the unspoken price of being the extra child, the one nobody had planned for. She did not complain, not once. Not because she had given up or because she did not know something was wrong, but because she was watching. The same way Kwame Asante had watched the market at 9 years old, Zara watched everything around her with eyes that were taking in more than anyone knew. She watched how Auntie Grace managed the household budget. She watched how the market worked. She watched which families in the neighborhood were surviving and which ones were sinking and what the difference was. And she read every book she could find. The school library had 53 books. She read all 53. She borrowed books from classmates. She found a church library and borrowed from there. She read everything, not because reading was going to directly solve her problems, but because reading was the one thing nobody could take from her, and that cost nothing and made her feel, even in the smallest way, that the world was larger than her corner of it. She finished primary school. She finished junior secondary. She was good, better than good. Her teachers wrote notes home about her that Auntie Grace read without knowing what to do with them. Zara noticed the notes and said nothing. At 16, she had a conversation with Auntie Grace that was the same conversation Kwame Asante had with his parents 11 years earlier, in the same language of numbers that do not add up. Senior secondary school, Auntie Grace said. Zara, I cannot. I know, Zara said. I will find a way. She found a way. She got a scholarship, partial, not full, but enough to cover school fees if she handled everything else. She did odd jobs, cleaning, market assistance, babysitting for neighbors. She ate less when the money was short, which was often. She finished senior secondary with grades that should have taken her to university, but could not because university cost money that the jobs and the small scholarship could not reach. At 18, she moved to Accra. She found a single room in a compound house in Asu, small, with a shared bathroom and a window that looked at the concrete wall of the next building. She found a job at a small catering company that did events. She served food at weddings, corporate functions, birthday parties. She watched wealthy Accra from the service entrance, the clothes, the cars, the conversations, the casualness of people who never had to calculate whether they could afford to eat today. She watched and she filed it away and she worked. The jewelry had come from her parents. Not much. Her mother was not a wealthy woman, but she had a few pieces, a gold chain, 2 rings, a small pair of earrings, a bracelet with a simple design. When Zara left Auntie Grace's house, Auntie Grace had given her the jewelry without being asked. It was the most generous thing Auntie Grace had ever done, and Zara knew it and felt it and kept the pieces carefully in a small cloth bag at the bottom of her bag. In good months, the jewelry stayed in the bag. In bad months, she went to the small jewelry shop near the main road in Asu, owned by a soft-spoken Ghanaian man named Mr. Oppong who had a kind face and never asked why, and she sold a piece. The bracelet first, in month 4 of the Accra life, when the catering company went 3 weeks without an event and the rent was due and the math was clear. Then the chain in month 7, when she got sick for a week and lost income and the medication cost more than she had. Then the earrings in month 11. Then the first ring. Each time she went to Mr. Oppong's shop and took a piece from the cloth bag and placed it on his glass counter, something inside her went a little quieter. Not broken, quieter. The way things go quiet when you have accepted something difficult and moved through it. By the time the rainy Thursday in question arrived, the cloth bag had one thing left in it. A simple gold ring, not expensive, not elaborate, but it had been her mother's ring, worn on her right hand every day of her adult life until the car accident on the Nsawam road. Zara had kept it longest. She had looked at it many times in bad months and put it back. She would sell everything else first. She would sell it last. She was 20 years old. She was walking back to her room from the catering company's event space where the morning shift had ended. The sky was the color of iron. The rain, when it started fast, the way Accra rain always starts, without a long warning, without a gentle beginning, just suddenly and completely. She had no umbrella. She ran, her bag over her head, looking for shelter. She almost missed him. He was on the pavement outside a closed shop front, half sitting, half lying against the wall, his back against the concrete, his head tilted forward, his eyes half closed. A young man, maybe her age, maybe a year older, in clothes that were clearly expensive but were now completely soaked. He had no umbrella. He had nothing. She stopped. Most people walked past. 2 people did. In the 30 seconds she stood there looking. Zara crouched down beside him. "Hey," she said. "Hey, are you okay?" He turned his head toward her. His eyes focused slowly. He had a beautiful face. She noticed this and then pushed it aside because it was not the relevant information right now. "I am," he started and then stopped. "I need my stomach." His voice was thin and confused in the way a person sounds when their blood sugar has completely dropped. "I have not eaten since yesterday." Zara looked at him. She looked at his clothes, the shirt that she could tell even wet was expensive, the shoes that even muddy were clearly quality. She looked at his face, which was genuinely pale under his complexion. She stood up. She went to Mr. Oppong's shop. She put her bag on the counter. She took out the cloth bag. She took out the last ring. She placed it on the glass counter. Mr. Oppong looked at it. He looked at her face. "This is the last one," he said. "I know," she said. He was quiet for a moment. He picked up the ring and turned it gently. He named a price. It was fair. He had always been fair. She took the money. She went to the nearest food seller, a woman with a cart under a large beach umbrella who sold rice and stew, and she bought a full plate, the biggest portion available, and a bottle of water. She carried it back through the rain, which was heavier now, her clothes completely soaked. The young man was still there, still against the wall. Another person had stopped and was crouching beside him now, an older woman who was looking uncertain about what to do. Zara knelt down beside him. She put the food in his hands. "Eat," she said. He looked at the food. He looked at her. "Who are you?" he said. "Nobody important," Zara said. "Eat first, talk later." He ate, not slowly. The hunger was real and the food disappeared quickly and some of the color came back into his face. The older woman, seeing that the situation was handled, moved on. The rain continued. When he finished, he looked up at her. She was still there, soaked, kneeling beside him on the wet pavement, watching him eat with the calm expression of someone who had made a decision and was not questioning it. "You bought this," he said. "It was not a question." Yes. Where did you get money for? He stopped, because he had seen. He had watched her walk to the jewelry shop. He had watched her come out. He had seen the transaction happen through the rain. You sold something, he said slowly. She said nothing. You sold something for a stranger you don't know, he said. She looked at him steadily. You needed food, I had a way to get it. He stared at her. The rain was beginning to lighten. The street around them was returning to its normal Accra afternoon rhythm, wet but moving. He was sitting upright now, the food in him doing what food does. What is your name? He said. She hesitated, then said it. Zara. I am Emre, he said. She nodded once, she stood up, she picked up her wet bag. I need to go, she said. Wait, he was reaching into his pocket. He pulled out his phone, expensive, water-resistant, completely unaffected by the rain in a way that told its own story about the difference between their phones. Can I your number, please? She looked at him. He looked back at her. His face had recovered fully now. He was just a young man in expensive wet clothes on a wet street, asking for a girl's number in the oldest and simplest way, and something in the directness of it made Zara decide. She gave him her number. Then she walked away through the last of the rain, her bag over her head, her cloth bag now empty, and she did not look back. She went home and changed her clothes and sat on the edge of her bed in her small room and looked at her hands for a long time. The place on her right hand where her mother's ring had been was bare and plain and obvious. She did not cry. She had made the right choice. She knew that with the same certainty she knew anything. She just sat with it for a while. Meanwhile, 2 kilometers away, Emre Sant walked back into his showroom. Mr. Oppong, the accountant, looked up from his desk at the young man who walked in soaked from head to toe, expensive shirt plastered to his skin, muddy shoes leaving tracks on the polished showroom floor. Sir, I am fine, Emre said. He walked to his office. He sat behind his desk. He placed his phone on the desk and looked at it. One new contact, Zara, just the name and the number, nothing else. He sat there for the rest of the afternoon, not really seeing the cars on the showroom floor, not really hearing Mr. Oppong's knock when he brought the afternoon sales report. He kept seeing her face, calm, steady, completely without calculation. She had sold something for him, a total stranger. In his entire 19 years, including the early years before the money when his father was still building, and things were sometimes tight, nobody had ever done anything for him that cost them their last thing. Not once. He sat with that all afternoon, and he understood, in the way you understand things that arrive not in your head but somewhere deeper, that whoever Zara was, she was not someone he was going to call once and forget about. He waited 4 days. Not because he was playing a game. He was not a game-playing person. Quame had raised him with too much directness for that. He waited 4 days because he was thinking. He wanted to call her right, and he did not know yet how to do that correctly. On the 5th day, at 7 in the evening, he called. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hello, her voice was cautious. The voice of someone who had learned that unexpected calls were usually not good news. Zara, he said, it is Emre from the rain. A brief pause. I know who you are, she said. The caution was still there, but there was something under it, not warmth yet, something more careful than warmth. Attention. I wanted to say thank you, he said, properly, not just in the rain with food in my mouth. She was quiet. How are you? He asked. I am fine, she said. Are you sure? Another pause. Longer he waited. Why are you calling? She said, not rudely, genuinely. The question of a person who has learned to ask clear questions because unclear expectations cost you. Because what you did, he said, I cannot stop thinking about it, and I want to know who you are, if you are willing to tell me. The pause that followed was the longest yet. He sat in his office in the showroom, the lights of Accra outside the window, and waited. "Okay," she said. They talked for 2 hours that first night. Not about the rain, not about the ring, not yet. They talked around the edges first, the way people do when they are trying to decide how much to trust the voice on the other end. They talked about Accra, about what parts of the city they knew. About food, she asked him why he had not eaten since the day before, and he explained about the morning that had started at 5 a.m. with a supplier emergency and had somehow never included a meal. She said that was foolish. He agreed. She made him laugh twice. Small laughs, surprised ones, the laugh of a person encountering something they did not expect. He called the next evening, and the evening after that. By the end of the first week, they were talking every day. By the end of the second week, they were talking twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, often for 2 hours or more. The conversations expanded. They went deeper. He told her about the showroom, about cars, about growing up in East Airport with a father who was a billionaire but made him earn his own money and what that had meant to him. He told her about the loan, the repayment, the feeling when the last payment cleared. She listened carefully. She asked good questions, not impressed questions, just precise ones. What kind of cars? How did you choose the location? Who was your first buyer? The questions of a person who was genuinely curious about how things worked, not about the glamour of them. Then one evening, the third week, she told him about her parents. She did not plan to. They were talking about family and he mentioned something about his mother and she got quiet and then she told him. 6 years old, the quiet house, the wrapper still on the line. He said nothing for a while. "How old were you when you moved to Accra?" he said eventually. 18. Alone. Alone. He absorbed this. He thought about himself at 18, the showroom opening, his parents at the event, his father's speech, the pride in the room. And Zara at 18, arriving in Accra alone with a cloth bag of jewelry and a plan to survive. "You are the strongest person I have spoken to in my life," he said. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. "I am not strong, I just did not have the option of stopping." "That is what strong is," he said. She went quiet. "The ring," he said carefully, "that you sold for me, was it?" "It was my mother's," she said. Her voice was level. The silence that followed was different from other silences in their conversations. It had weight. "Zara, do not say sorry," she said quietly. "I made the choice. I would make it again. You needed help." He did not say sorry. He sat with the weight of what she had told him, and he felt something that he had no previous experience of, a specific kind of debt that had nothing to do with money. A debt of care. A debt of what it means when someone gives you their last thing. "Can I see you?" he said. A pause. "Emre." "Not for anything complicated. Just, I want to see you, in person. I want to look at you while we talk instead of imagining you." She laughed again, the surprised laugh that was becoming his favorite sound. "You are very direct," she said. "My father says it saves time." "Okay," she said. "When?" He asked her to come to the showroom. He asked her this carefully, telling her it was where he spent his days and he wanted to show her something. He did not explain further. He was nervous, which surprised him. He had not been nervous about business, about deals, about significant money. But he was nervous about this. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon. He saw her come in through the glass door, and his heart did something stupid and immediate, and he was glad that Mr. Oppong had gone to lunch. She was wearing a simple yellow dress that she had clearly chosen carefully. Her hair was pulled back. She was looking at the cars the way he looked at them, not with the price assessment calculation of buyers, not with the performative admiration of people trying to impress him. She was looking at them the way she looked at everything, directly, with genuine attention. "This is yours," she said when she reached him, not a question. "Mine," he said. She looked at him, then back at the cars. "The Bentley," she said, "the one at the front. The flying spur. Tell me about it." He told her. They walked around every car on the floor. He talked and she listened, and she asked questions that surprised him about the engineering, the materials, the history of the brands. She had done research. She had looked things up before she came. "You researched," he said, not hiding how much this landed. She shrugged. "You talk about these cars every day. I wanted to understand what you were talking about." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Come outside." Outside the showroom, in the small private lot at the side, was a car with a white sheet over it. Zara looked at the sheet. She looked at him. "Emre, this is for you," he said. He pulled the sheet off. It was not a Bentley. It was not a Ferrari. It was a white Mercedes-Benz C-Class, perfect and clean, with a small bow on the hood. The kind of car that in any other context would be extraordinary, but in a showroom of Bugattis and Aston Martins looked modest, chosen with care. He had chosen it because he had listened. He had heard her talk about how she traveled the trotro, the occasional Uber when she was running late and the trotro was too slow, the long walks. He had thought about what would change her daily life in the most real and practical way. And this was it. She stared at the car. "I cannot accept this," she said. "You sold your mother's ring for me," he said simply. Her face changed. "That is not," she started. "I know," he said. "I know it is not the same, and I know this is too much and too fast, and you do not know me well enough yet to take a car from me." He paused. "But I want you to know that I see you, not the girl who helped me. You, the girl who reads before she comes somewhere so she understands the conversation. The girl who survived everything alone since she was 6. The girl who gave her last thing without asking for anything back." He stopped. His voice was steady, but something in it was not completely steady. "I see that, and I will keep seeing it, if you let me." Zara was looking at the car. She did not look at him for a long time. Then she turned to face him. "I see you too," she said quietly. "I have been seeing you since the rain." She paused. "I am not ready to accept a car," she said, "but I accept this, us, whatever this is." He smiled, a full real smile, not a showroom smile. "That is enough," he said. "That is more than enough for now." She did not take the car home that day. She left it in the lot. But she came back for it a week later, after they had talked about it 6 more times, and she had stopped arguing against it, and started making plans for what she would do with the time she saved not taking trotros. He drove her home one evening 2 weeks after the showroom visit in his own car, through the East Airport neighborhood where the showroom and his family home sat. She was quiet, looking at the houses. "This is where you grew up," she said. "Yes." She looked at the homes, large, gated, well-lit, the kind of neighborhood she had served food at events, entering through the service gate. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Yes." "Does it ever feel like you were just lucky, that it could have been the other way, that you could have been me and I could have been you?" He thought about this seriously. My father would say no. He would say it was not luck, it was work, but he paused. "I think about my father at 14 carrying boxes at the market, and I think about you at 14, and the difference is not work. You work just as hard. The difference is what you started with." She was quiet. "Does that make you feel guilty?" she asked. "It makes me feel responsible," he said. "Guilty is a feeling that does not do anything. Responsible is a feeling that makes you act." She looked at him. "Your father taught you that?" she said. "Word for word." She smiled, the full smile, not the careful one. "I want to meet him," she said. Emre told his parents about Zara the way he told them everything important, directly and completely. He came to the family home on a Sunday evening after dinner, which was the time his family gathered without agenda, and he sat in the living room with his parents and he said, I need to tell you about someone." Adwoa set down her cup of tea. Quaim turned from the window where he had been looking at the garden. Both of them with the full attention of parents who had been waiting for this sentence for a while. He told them everything: the rain, the ring, the phone calls, the showroom visit, all of it in order clearly without leaving out the difficult parts, including the part about her parents dying when she was 6, the compound house in Nsawam, the jewelry sold piece by piece to pay rent in Accra. When he finished, the living room was quiet. Adwoa was the first to speak. "She sold her mother's ring," she said. "Yes. For you, a stranger." "Yes, Mama." Adwoa looked at Quaim. Something passed between them that Emre recognized as the private communication of two people who had been together long enough that words were optional. Quaim looked at his son. "You like her," he said. "I love her," Emre said. He said it without drama, without build-up, just clearly the way things are when they are certain. Quaim nodded once, slowly. "Bring her," he said. Adwoa made the kind of dinner you make when something matters. Zara arrived at the family home in the white Mercedes, which she had started driving with the specific caution of someone who was still slightly afraid of damaging something too important. She wore a simple wrapped dress in dark green. Her hair was down. She was carrying a small container of kelwell that she had made herself, which she pressed into Adwoa's hands at the door. Adwoa looked at the kelwell. She looked at Zara. "You cooked," she said. "I could not arrive empty-handed," Zara said. Adwoa's expression did not change. She was a controlled woman, like all truly confident women are, but something behind her eyes shifted in a way that Emre, who knew his mother's face completely, registered as approval. Dinner was quiet in the careful way of first important meetings, but not stiff. Quaim asked Zara questions, not testing questions, information questions, about her work, about what she wanted to do, about her time in Nsawam. He asked about her parents in the way that a man who grew up with very little asks about people who had very little, with the specific respect of someone who knows what that life costs. Zara answered directly. She did not perform sadness about her past, and she did not minimize it. She spoke about her parents and her auntie and the move to Accra, the way she moved through everything, clearly, without drama. When they were done eating, Quaim excused himself from the table and Adwoa took Zara to the kitchen to help with the dishes, leaving Emre alone at the table for 15 minutes. He sat there, looking at the garden through the window. His father came back and sat across from him. "She is excellent," Quaim said. "I know. Not because of the ring," Quaim tapped the table once. "Because of how she speaks. She speaks like someone who has thought about what they are going to say before they say it. That is rare." "I know, Papa. What are your intentions?" Emre looked at his father. "To marry her," he said. Quaim looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded again. "Then do it properly," he said. "Go to her. If she has no family, you bring her family. You make the visit. You do not skip the steps because there is no one to enforce them. The steps exist for the people going through them, not for the observers." Emre understood exactly what his father meant. Zara had no parents to visit, but she had Auntie Grace. Auntie Grace still lived in Nsawam. She was 54 now, wider in the hips and more tired in the face, but with the same practical directness. Zara had maintained a relationship with her, not a close one, but a real one. She sent money when she had it. She called on important occasions. She did not blame Auntie Grace for the years of the mat in the corner because Auntie Grace had done what she could with what she had. Emre and Zara drove to Nsawam on a Saturday. They took Quaim and Adwoa with them. Auntie Grace opened the door and looked at the 4 people on her small concrete step. Her niece, a young man she had never seen, and 2 people whose clothes communicated clearly who they were without a word being said. And her face went through several expressions in rapid succession, before settling on cautious welcome. They sat in the small living room. Quaim did the speaking on Emre's behalf formally, the way things are done. He explained who they were, who his son was, what his son's intentions were. He spoke with respect, not condescension, treating Auntie Grace as the family representative she was. Auntie Grace listened with the expression of a woman being surprised by something good and not fully trusting it yet. When Quaim finished, she looked at Zara. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Yes, Auntie," Zara said simply. Auntie Grace looked at Emre. "You will take care of her," she said, not a question, an instruction. "Yes, Ma," Emre said. Auntie Grace sat back. She looked at her hands in her lap. Then she looked at Zara again, and something that had been held tight in her face for 20 years loosened slightly. "Your mother would have liked him," she said. Zara looked down at her hands. "I know," she said quietly. Emre proposed on a Thursday evening. Not in the showroom. He had wanted to do that originally and then decided against it. The showroom was his world. He wanted to propose in neutral ground, in a place that belonged to neither of them yet. He drove Zara to East Airport Beach, which was not the most glamorous beach in the world, but was the beach she had mentioned once, in passing, as the first place she had gone in Accra when she arrived at 18, because she had heard the sea and followed the sound on her first free afternoon. She did not know he had remembered this. They walked on the beach in the early evening. The sky was the specific orange-pink of a good West African sunset. The water was gold. He stopped walking. She turned to look at him, and he was on one knee. She put her hands over her mouth. "Zara," he said, "I fell in the rain and you did not walk past. You could have walked past and your life would have been easier and you would have kept the only thing your mother left you. But you did not walk past, and I have been thinking about that for months. I have been thinking about what it says about who you are." He paused. "I want to spend my whole life knowing a person like you. I want to build things with you. I want to argue with you at 6 in the morning and eat your food and watch you figure out problems that other people give up on. I want all of it." He held up the ring, a simple gold ring. Not extravagant, chosen specifically because of the one she had sold. "Will you marry me?" She was crying. She had not cried since the day she sold the ring on the rainy street. She reached out and touched his face first, just one hand, cupping his jaw for a moment, feeling the reality of him. Then she took the ring. She put it on. "Yes," she said. They were married 3 months later. Emre was 20. Zara was 20. Every person who heard this had the same initial reaction, too young, and then they met the two of them and revised the thought because there was a quality to both of them, a rootedness that made age feel like the wrong measurement. The wedding was at a garden venue in Accra. Not the most expensive venue in the city. Zara had been involved in every decision, and she had chosen a beautiful but not ostentatious space because that was who she was. 400 guests, Quaim's network, the business world of Accra, family, and 3 tables that Emre had quietly filled with people from Zara's world, her old colleagues from the catering company, her neighbors from the Asu compound house, Auntie Grace in the front row. Mr. Oppong came, the jewelry shop owner from Asu. Emre had found him, visited his shop, thanked him properly for being kind to Zara over the years. Mr. Oppong arrived at the wedding in his good suit and sat near the front and cried quietly during the vows. During the vows, Emre said one thing that was not written in any ceremony script. He said, "I promise to see you, every day, the way you saw me in the rain." Zara looked at him with the full attention look. "I promise the same," she said. They moved into a mansion in East Airport. Not the family home, their own. Emre had bought it 2 months before the wedding, unfurnished, and they had spent every evening after the showroom designing it together. Not an interior designer, them. She chose the kitchen because she cooked. He chose the garage because, obviously, they argued happily about colors for weeks. The house had space for his parents to visit. It had a garden. It had a study that Emre built for Zara, with a desk and a bookshelf and a window that looked at the morning sky, because she had told him once that the thing she missed most about her childhood was not having a quiet place to read. She stood in the empty study before they moved in and ran her hand along the empty shelves. "I am going to fill these," she said. "I know," he said. They made a plan on their wedding night. Not a romantic plan, a real one. They sat in the hotel suite after the reception, both too tired to sleep, both still in wedding clothes, shoes off, and they talked about the next 5 years the way they talked about everything, directly and specifically. 5 years, then higher studies abroad together, both of them. Not separately, they had discussed this at length and agreed that the point of going was to go together, to see the world together, to bring back what they learned together. In those 5 years, they would build. Zara had been helping at the showroom informally since the first month they were together. She had a gift for the operational side of the business. The things that Emre's passion for cars sometimes caused him to overlook. She noticed inefficiencies. She saw where client relationships were being left to chance when they should be systematized. She understood from her years in catering how service looked from the customer's perspective, and what the difference was between a client who bought a car and a client who became a loyal customer who brought 3 more clients. 6 months after the wedding, she was the showroom manager. It was not a gift. It was not nepotism. She had proven it day by day in front of Mr. Oppong, who had been skeptical and professional about it and had come to her 3 months in and said, "The client retention numbers this quarter are the best we have recorded." He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Under Zara's management, the showroom became something different from what it had been, still about the cars, still the premium experience, but with a layer of genuine relationship management that made wealthy Accra buyers feel seen as people, not just as transactions. She knew their birthdays. She remembered their children's names. When a client came in browsing without a clear need, she sat with them and asked about their lives until the real need emerged. She had been trained, without knowing it was training, by years of watching people from the service entrance. Emre watched his wife run his business and felt something he told his father about on a Sunday visit. "She is better at the customer side than I am," he said. Quaim looked at him. "Does that bother you?" he asked. "No," Emre said, and he meant it completely. "It makes the business better, and it makes her happy, and it makes me, I don't know how to say it." "Proud," Quaim said. "Yes." Quaim nodded. "That is what a real partnership feels like. Neither person is losing, both people are winning." The expansion started at the end of year 1. Not planned for year 1, but an opportunity arrived in the form of a Kumasi businessman who came to Accra specifically to buy a vehicle from Asante Prestige Motors, and who, after the purchase, asked Emre why there was no equivalent showroom in Kumasi. Emre came home that evening and described the conversation to Zara. She had her notebook out before he finished the sentence. Asante Prestige Motors Kumasi opened in month 14 of the marriage. Asante Prestige Motors Takoradi followed in month 20. Each one benefited from Quaim's national reputation, Emre's car knowledge, and the operational framework Zara had built in the Accra showroom and turned into a replicable system. By year 2, there were 4 locations across Ghana. By year 3, something bigger happened. A Togolese business family, the Agbetas, old contacts of Quaim's, reached out about a potential partnership for a Lemay location. Emre and Zara flew to Lemay for 3 days, met the family, assessed the market, came home and decided yes. Asante Prestige Motors Lemay was the first location outside Ghana. Dakar followed, then Lagos, a bigger, more complex market that required 18 months of planning and a local partner. But Lagos opened, And Lagos, with its density of wealth and its car culture and its buyers who wanted exactly what Asant Prestige offered, became within 8 months the highest-grossing location in the entire network. At 22, Emre was not a multimillionaire anymore. He was significantly beyond that. He sat across from his father at the Sunday dinner table one evening with a single piece of paper, the latest valuation of Asant Prestige Motors across all locations, and slid it across the table. Quaim picked it up, read it, placed it face down on the table. He looked at his son. "Your grandfather carried boxes at the market," he said. "I know, Papa." "Your grandmother sold food from a cart." "I know." Quaim picked up his glass. He raised it once across the table. "They would not believe this," he said. Emre raised his glass back. They drank. In year 3, Zara got pregnant. They had not planned for it to happen exactly then, but they had not planned for it either. And when the test was positive, she sat on the edge of the bath in their mansion and felt the specific mix of emotions that is not entirely happiness and not entirely fear, but is something in the middle that only this particular moment creates. Emre was in the bedroom doorway. She held up the test. He came and sat beside her on the edge of the bath, without saying anything, and put his arm around her, and they both looked at the small test together. "Are you scared?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said, "so am I." He laughed. Then she laughed. Then they were both sitting on the edge of the bath in their mansion in East Airport at 2 in the morning, laughing at something that was not a joke, because sometimes you laugh because it is the only thing large enough for the feeling. Their daughter, Accra, was born in the Accra hospital where Emre's mother had gone for her health checkups her whole life. She arrived at 4:30 in the morning, the same hour, Adwoa pointed out, that she had always woken up to start her day. Everyone found this significant. Adwoa held her granddaughter in the hospital room and was completely quiet for 3 minutes, which was the most anyone had ever seen her be quiet. Quaim stood in the corner of the room with his hands in his pockets and looked at his granddaughter with the expression of a man encountering something that exceeds every category he has. "Kweku Asant carried boxes at the market," he said, very quietly to no one in particular, "and now there is her." Year 5 arrived. The plan from the wedding night, the 5 years, the studies abroad, the world had lived in both of them the whole time, not as a dream, as a scheduled thing, a real date on a real calendar. Before they left, Emre hired a general manager for the showroom network, a 38-year-old man named Francis Tawaya, who had run operations for a major automotive group in South Africa, and who Zara had spent 4 months recruiting, evaluating, and finally convincing to join them. She handed over the manager role to Francis with a document she had written herself, 37 pages of operational guidelines, client relationship protocols, staff management procedures, brand standards. Francis read it and then said, with the specific expression of someone whose expectations have been exceeded, "Did you study management formally?" "No," Zara said. "I learned from watching things go wrong." Francis started on a Monday. By the end of his first month, he had called Zara 5 times with questions. By the end of his 3rd month, he had stopped calling because the system she had built answered the questions for him. The network ran without them. Their son arrived before the departure date. They had not planned for 2 children before 25, but their son Kofi arrived in month 56 of the 5-year plan, 11 months before the departure, and reorganized the timeline in the way that children reorganize everything, completely and without apology. He arrived noisily, as second children often do, as if aware that the first child had already established the quiet approach and was determined to differentiate. Emre was in the delivery room and held his son and said, "He is loud." Zara, who had just delivered him, said, "He is perfect." "He is loud and perfect," Emre agreed. They adjusted the plan by 7 months. Not cancelled, adjusted. Because that was how they operated, not rigidly, not with the brittleness of people who cannot move when the plan moves, but with the flexibility of two people who had the same destination and understood that the route was negotiable. They left for the United Kingdom on a bright October morning, both children strapped into their car seats, the house locked, Francis having confirmed 3 times that everything was covered, Kwame and Adwoa at the airport to see them off. At the departure gate, Adwoa held Accra, who was 2.5 and not entirely happy about being passed between adults. Kwame held Kofi, who was less than a year old and was looking at everything with wide, calm eyes. Kwame handed Kofi back to Emre. "Come back," he said, just that. "Always, Papa," Emre said. The 5 years abroad adjusted to 4.5, were everything they had planned. Emre did an executive MBA at a London business school that he had chosen for its strong African business curriculum and its network of alumni operating across the continent. His classmates from 22 countries, backgrounds ranging from inherited family businesses to self-built startups, were the most interesting group of people he had ever been in a room with. He came home every evening with ideas that had to come out before he could eat dinner. Zara enrolled in a business management program at the same institution. She sat in her first lecture and listened to the professor describe operational frameworks that she had arrived at independently over 5 years of running a showroom, and she felt a specific satisfaction that had nothing to do with the validation itself and everything to do with the confirmation. She had been thinking correctly. The theory matched the practice she had built from scratch. They traveled, not as tourists, as learners. They went to automotive markets in Stuttgart and Munich, where Emre sat with manufacturers and distributors and came away with 3 partnership conversations that would eventually result in exclusive West African distribution rights for 2 luxury brands. They went to Singapore to study the structure of its retail luxury sector. They went to Nairobi and Johannesburg to understand where the African luxury market was going. They sent Francis updates from everywhere. Francis, who had by now settled fully into the operational role, ran the network with the competence of someone who had been given excellent tools and had the intelligence to use them. Revenue continued to grow. The Lagos location opened its 2nd floor. A new location in Abidjan was approved and opened remotely. And they lived, simply, in a rented flat in South London with 2 children and 2 sets of coursework and regular Sunday calls with Kwame and Adwoa, and the specific intimacy of 2 people reduced to a small space, and all the better for it. They cooked together. They walked the children to the park. They argued about things that were not important and agreed about things that were. They read. Zara filled 3 more bookshelves. One evening, in year 3 of the abroad period, they were sitting in the kitchen after the children were asleep. Both with reading material, both tired, both comfortable in the specific way of 2 people who have been through enough together to need no performance. Zara looked up from her reading. "Emre," she said. "MMM. Do you remember the rain?" He put down his book. He looked at her. "Every day," he said. She nodded. She went back to her reading. That was all. That was enough. They came home on a bright morning in March. Emre was 30. Zara was 30. Accra was 5 years old and spoke English with a slight South London accent that made Kwame laugh every time she spoke. Kofi was almost 3 and was, in the words of Francis, who had met them at the airport, clearly his father. He looked at the cars in the car park and tried to touch every one. The mansion in East Airport was exactly as they had left it. Francis had arranged for it to be cleaned and freshened. Zara's study was exactly as she had left it, bookshelves waiting, morning light in the window. She stood in the doorway of the study and looked at it. Emre came to stand behind her. "Welcome home," he said. She turned around. She was holding his face in her hands the way she had at the beach before she said yes. The same gesture, exactly the same. "I want to build something here," she said. "Something of my own, a business, not the showroom, something new, for young people from places like Nsawam who need what I needed." He looked at her. "Tell me the plan," he said. She took his hand and pulled him to the kitchen table. She opened a notebook, a new one, bought in London, with the same instinct that had made him keep one in his shirt pocket as a teenager, and her keep one in her bag through every hard year. She opened to the first page. She wrote 2 words at the top. She turned the notebook so he could read it. He read it. He looked up at her. "Let's build it," he said. So, that is the story of Zara and Emre. A rainy afternoon, an empty stomach, a last ring, a girl who could have walked past and did not, and everything that followed. But I want to stay with you for one more moment, because this story is not just a love story. It is not just a success story. It is not even just a story about money, though money is in it, real money, the kind that changes families for generations. This story is about something much simpler and much harder. It is about what kind of person you are when you have nothing left. Think about Zara in that moment. She had one ring, the last ring, her mother's ring, the last physical thing connecting her to 2 people who had loved her and who she had lost when she was so small she barely had words for the loss. She had kept that ring through everything, every hard month, every empty week, every night in a small room in a compound house in Asu when the city felt too big and too indifferent and staying was the hardest thing. She had held onto that ring. And then she saw a stranger on the ground in the rain. And she let it go. Not because she did not know what she was giving up. She knew exactly. That is what makes it so powerful. It was not a careless act. It was a completely conscious choice made by a person who looked at the situation and asked herself what was right, and did that thing even though it cost her the last thing she had. That is character. Not the character that shows up when things are easy. The character that shows up at your absolute floor. The character that exists not because anyone is watching, but because it is simply who you are. And here is what this story wants you to know about that kind of character. It does not go unseen. It might feel like it goes unseen. It might feel in the moment like you are alone on a wet street in the rain giving your last thing to someone who will walk away and forget you. It might feel like the city is too big and too busy and too full of its own concerns to notice what you did or why you did it. But Emre saw. He saw all of it. He saw her walk to the shop. He saw the transaction. He saw her come back in the rain. He saw her kneel down beside him with food she had bought with the price of her mother's ring. He saw it all through half-conscious eyes, and it went into him like something permanent. And he never forgot. The people who are worth loving, the real ones, the ones who see clearly, they see what you do at your lowest, not what you perform when things are good, what you actually are when everything is stripped away. Zara was the same person at her lowest that she was at her highest. That is why Emre loved her. That is why Kwame and Edwoa welcomed her without hesitation. That is why, when she stood in her study at 30 years old with 2 children and a husband and a mansion and a new idea in a new notebook, it felt not like luck but like arrival, like the destination that had always existed, waiting for the person she had always been to find her way to it. There is also a lesson in Emre, not just in Zara. Emre was 19 years old and a multi-millionaire when he lay on that wet street. He could have gotten up, taken the girl's number, called her once out of guilt, sent money to replace the ring, considered the debt settled. Nobody would have blamed him. That would have been the transactional version of the story. But Imre's father had taught him something more important than how to make money. He had taught him to see people. Not their status, not their usefulness, not what they had or what they could give him, their actual character, their actual person. Kwame Asan had spent his entire rise watching people who only saw his poverty, his neighborhood, his worn clothes, his lack of university education. He had been underestimated by every person who looked at the surface and drew their conclusions. And he had built his empire not by becoming like those people, but by remaining himself, by continuing to see the people others did not see. He had raised his son to do the same. And so Emre saw Zara. Not the girl in the wet clothes with the empty cloth bag, the person underneath, the specific quality of someone who acts from character rather than from calculation. He saw her and he chose her. And that choice, made on a rainy afternoon with food in his hands and her walking away through the last of the rain, was the best choice of his life. This story ends with two people who are 30 years old, sitting at a kitchen table with a notebook open between them, planning something new. It ends with a 5-year-old girl named Accra who walks around the showroom on weekends pointing at cars and asking her father their names and their speeds. It ends with a little boy named Kofi who tries to touch every car in every car park he passes, like his father did at 6 years old, pressing his face against a Bentley that would one day be his. It ends with a library in a school in Nsawam, built and funded by Zara 2 years after she returned from London, stocked with books whose pages are all present, opened on a Tuesday morning when children arrive with their school bags and find the shelves waiting. It ends with an old man named Mr. Oppong, who runs a small jewelry shop in Asu and who, on one particular Thursday, received a visitor, a young woman and a young man, both well-dressed, both together, who placed on his counter a ring. A gold ring, simple, exactly like the one he had bought from her in the rain. Zara slid it across the glass counter. Mr. Oppong looked at her. "This is a gift," she said, "from us, for being kind to me when it mattered." Mr. Oppong looked at the ring. He looked at Zara. He looked at the young man beside her. He put the ring carefully back in the box. He cleared his throat. "Your mother," he said, "would be proud." Zara looked at the ring in its box. She nodded once. "I know," she said. "If this story left something burning in your chest, if you felt that rise, that warmth, that quiet fire of a story that tells you who you are capable of being, then you are exactly the kind of person who belongs here at Fair Folktales. Like this video right now. It is free and it keeps us going, and it means we can keep telling stories like this one. Subscribe to Fair Folktales and turn on the notification bell, because every week we are here with a new story. A story about someone who was overlooked. A story about kindness that found its way back. A story about a man who built from nothing. A story about a girl who gave her last thing and received everything. Share this video with someone who needs it today. You know who that person is. You thought of them while you were watching this. Send it to them. Let them know that Fair Folktales sees them. And comment below. Tell us, what is the most generous thing you have ever done for a stranger? Or what is the most generous thing a stranger has ever done for you? We want to know. We read every single comment. This is Fair Folktales. The greedy always fall, the overlooked always rise, and the ones who give from their lowest moment, they always receive from their highest. We will see you in the next story.